Alright, podcast episode number 12 in my 21 podcast episode challenge this month. I wanted to come in and talk a little bit about ego today, just because I feel like when you're starting something new, it can be really exhilarating and exciting and fun and nerve wracking, all of that stuff. But once you start and you find a little bit of reward and you start getting recognition and or praise and or negative things as well, failure, criticism, rude comments, things like that. So on either spectrum of positive or negative, ego can definitely be affected. And that's kind of why I wanted to come in and talk about that today, because I feel like that's part of that journey that you or that I have found and been trying to navigate in my life, of how much do I let my ego get the best of me, and how do I make sure that I'm continuously focused on growth and remaining humble, I guess, in a way, because I feel like there's a competitive advantage to being the type of person who thinks highly of themselves and does have a strong confidence and conviction within them, which I think there's a big difference between confidence and ego, and I think balancing that line is kind of where most people live on. Uh, it's almost kind of like frowned upon to be someone or I guess if you do it in the wrong way, you come across arrogant, but I feel like if you can do it in a right way, where you come off as someone who just knows who they are and what they want and is still humble and kind, I think that's the major difference when you can figure out those things. And obviously with my last episode talking about how once you start to receive praise or people start telling you good job, then that all almost becomes part of your identity, and you're like, oh, like I'm good at this and things like that. But at the end of the day, like there's always room for growth, and I think that's where I balance out my confidence and conviction and don't go down a path of arrogance and ego, because once you I feel like once you're focused on ego, you're thinking about how you're perceived from other people, or how other people are gonna react and think about what you're doing and how you're doing it, and if they're gonna give you a compliment or feedback or think you're a failure or things like that. Like I think once you're in ego, you're basically living in a state where you're thinking about how other people will perceive you. And I feel like if you're focused on growth and confidence and conviction, you're more concerned with you, and it's you against you. Like how I find it is ego in a way is tying how other people perceive you, but someone who you run into and they're just have this unspoken confidence about them, and they don't need to say anything, but you just kind of have that feeling that they like know who they are and what they want, and they don't have an ego, but you can tell they're just kind of like a somebody. That's someone who isn't even really worried about how other people perceive them. And that's kind of how I have found the best interactions come out of. And it's also the type of person who I always want to be is the type of person who's just humble, but also confident and has a conviction about myself, where I know who I am and what I want, and I can communicate it in a way that's very articulate and comfortable, and it doesn't come across arrogant or anything like that. And I think those are kind of the things. So when it comes to recognizing when you're in an ego-driven state or just like a natural calm confidence, I feel like you have to look at, are you more worried about the results that you will get and the comparisons that'll happen and the external validation that you will get if you do this certain action? So for me, and it's so easy to do in this podcast journey, right? Like I can totally get all tied up in the results and how many views and how many comments and likes is the social is gonna get, and oh man, like, but what about that person who did 21 episodes and they're so much further ahead of me? And that's when you compare, or when you want to tell people and like no one cares, because at the end of the day kind of no one cares. That's when you're ego driven. But for me, I'm not paying attention to the results of all of this. It's really nice, but like I think I've heard Gary Vee talk about it, and he talks about the fact that he doesn't hear anything. Like he's always just like this. For you just listening, it's he's covering his ears. You know, he doesn't hear the positive, the validation, the good things, people telling him he's the greatest, all of that stuff. He doesn't hear that, and he doesn't hear the negative side because he's just so focused on him and what he wants to do. And I am developing myself into that mode where I don't care about, or try not to care about what's going on the outside, because it's all internal. Like I always think about this as a me against me, like this is a year to you challenge. It's not a year to me, everybody else. Like I don't want to be that. I want to be in constant competition with myself and always chasing a version of myself that I can look up to, so then therefore one day my kids will look up to me, and I can always have I can always have a internal dialogue that I am who I say I am, and I'm reliable and trustworthy and work hard and all of that stuff. And I think the best question that I always ask myself, if I feel like I'm teetering that balance that we talked about between ego and real confidence, I just always ask myself, am I doing this for growth, or am I doing this to prove something? And if you can ask yourself that question and answer it honestly within yourself, like are you training and doing a marathon because you're excited of who you will become at the end of the marathon and how fit you'll be and all that stuff, and it's all personal growth? Or are you doing a marathon because you feel like you need to prove to other people that you are healthy and you can run a marathon? I guess, are you doing it for the medal, or are you doing it for the growth that you will achieve at becoming a person that can run a marathon? So those are that's the question that I constantly want to ask myself, and I encourage others to try to think about it in that way. Like, are you paying attention to results, comparisons, and external validation? And when you ask yourself, am I doing this for growth, or am I doing this to prove something? And generally, if you can answer all of those questions, you'll find out if you're doing something ego-driven or if you're doing something growth-driven. I feel like those are some practical things that I'm really trying to focus on, grow, and really, I guess, just trying to find how I let my ego define me and how I let that question within myself be answered. It's like this 21 podcast episode, all of that stuff. Like, I'm excited to see the development. Hey, I don't know if I've been developing a lot, but I hope that my communication towards this has gotten a little bit better. So at the end of this month, when I'm done, I will go back and kind of watch every episode. And maybe I'll just watch the first one and the last one and just see how different or how drastic it is in the way I'm talking. So I'm hoping it'll be better, but that's what I'm excited for. I'm not excited to, I guess I'm excited to, but I'm not doing this to post at the end of all of this, like, hey, challenge complete, 21 episodes done, tick, like, cool. I'm gonna share because it's how I keep myself accountable to the things that I want to do. Is I say something publicly of what I want to accomplish, and then I have this accountability. I have this accountability within myself on. That's kind of how I keep the agreement with myself in a way. Is I know that I have told people, and I don't want to let myself down, but I also don't want to let others down for the people that are listening and I am impacting. I don't want to let them down as well. So that's kind of the thing, but I'm not paying attention to how many people there is. I'm just paying attention to, hey, I do what I say what I'm going to do, and I hope I'm growing along the way. And that's it. And it's been good. And I think if I was to focus more on results and external validation and worry about views and all of that stuff, that's when you get miserable, because I feel like when you're ego driven, ego demands perfection, and making mistakes feels like a failure because that one didn't perform as well as the next one. And so many people didn't like this one, and when you're ego focused, it feels like failures are bad things, and it's not a learning opportunity. And that's why I always want to look at each thing as a learning opportunity. Be like, oh, like my body language was weird in that one, or my tonality needs to shift in a way, or you said 37 times. Or you need to work on your eye contact, or your pauses don't quite match up. And if I can focus on those tiny little actions that I can always get better at, it's not about the outside external validation. It's about me against me again. So, and I think, I guess another reason why ego could kind of like hold you back from actually accomplishing is if you're focused on outcomes, it makes the process of accomplishing feel less rewarding. Because if I get to like my 21st episode and I'm like, man, like I wanted more streams or more listeners and blah. I wanted more people, loyal followers and blah, 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 blah. But I'm like, that, like I get to the end of the 21 days and I don't enjoy it. I'm just worried about other people. But if I could focus on my growth, then I get so excited because I'm, oh, look at that little win. Oh man, you're so much more comfortable talking to the camera. Look at your voice, you don't say as much anymore. Like, oh, you started the podcast differently here. That's so exciting. It's all good. And I think those types of things make the process so much more rewarding, is if you're not focused on the ego, results, that stuff. You're just focused on you against you. So don't let ego hold you back. Find ways to just ask yourself that question. Am I doing this for growth or trying to prove something? If you're trying to prove something, accept it, because, okay, I'm trying to prove something. Did I prove it or not? Because, to be honest, if you prove it and you prove that you are who you say you are and you want the external validation for it, kudos. Like, great. It's awesome. And you'll get rewarded and you'll feel some dopamine hits and it'll be great and you'll feel good for a moment. But if you're only living in that, where you're just constantly searching for that external validation, that's where it gets dangerous and not bad things happen. That's where you are always on the chase. That's where you're always on the chase, and it's not for fun and you don't enjoy it because you just feel like you have to prove something to everyone all the time, and that existence sucks. I don't think anyone wants to live in an existence where they constantly feel like they have to prove themselves to their friends or their parents or their work colleagues. Or what a miserable existence. I can't imagine that would be fun, to constantly be worried about how other people are going to see it, and do they think I'm smart, and do they think I'm a good podcaster? Like, that existence just doesn't seem fun. So how can you always focus on what am I trying to grow instead of what am I trying to prove? And if you can make that shift, I have found it makes my life a lot better, because I'm not constantly worried about how other people will see it. It's about how I see it and what I want out of it. So those are some other things. Let me see. I would say I have notes here, and I was just talking about how to manage ego, and I have practicing self-awareness, and I think that's the name of the game. You know, if you know who you are and you know yourself, that's where it gets really easy. But something Simon Sinek talks about is, how do you connect to your why? And I feel like I've heard it in Tony Robbins stuff as well. If you have a big enough why, you can figure out pretty much any how. So connecting your growth strategies to a why also helps when you ask yourself that question: am I trying to grow or prove something? I always, kind of what we talked about in the last couple episodes, where I said focus on the process. That's where you celebrate those small wins, that consistency, the easy wins, the tiny little actions. Did you put on your running shoes? Those tiny little things, when you're focused on that, it's not about the results, it's about that. And then if you do accomplish great challenges and stuff like that, staying humble is always a good thing. I obviously have done some what I would consider pretty cool or pretty impressive accomplishments, and I also just realized that it's really not that impressive. Like, at the end of the day, 10,000 push-ups in a month, I was like, cool, okay, next. Like, it is what it is. It's an awesome accomplishment. I was very present in the moment when I did it, but when I look back, I'm like, there's probably someone who's done more than 10,000 push-ups in a month. Like, it's awesome, but I also try and remain like, hey, I'm just a person. I'm just a person chasing the best version of myself. and I accomplish cool things sometimes, and sometimes I don't, and sometimes I fail, and sometimes I get up, and sometimes I'm tired, and it's like we're all just humans, and some people have different levels of drive and levels of what makes them uncomfortable, and levels of how hard they want to push themselves, and some people are so good with just the life that they have, and they're good with just, I hope this doesn't come off wrong, but they're good with being complacent. Like, they're good. They're just comfortable. They don't want to push or strive for anything else, and that's awesome for those people. I don't know why. I feel like I'm just wired in a way where I just constantly want to achieve and do bigger and better things. I just am that type of person, and I accept it for who it is. That's where that self-awareness comes in, is I just realize I am that person, and I can't change it, and everyone's malleable and everything like that, but I also like that about me. It's not like something that I view as a negative thing. I view it as a positive thing, so, and kudos to everyone that is not like me and likes just comfortable and that stuff too. Like, I just always want to be uncomfortable. It's weird. I just like living and operating in that level. So, but I also try and really remain humble even when I do accomplish some pretty cool things. I can realize that for some people it's very impressive, and I am excited for the accomplishments that I do and have achieved in my life, but I realize it's all just stepping stones, and at the end of it, it's all small. At the end of the day, like, we're all just people, and in 300 years, no one's going to know who I am. And probably even less than that, probably 100 years, probably no one's going to remember me or know who I am or anything like that. In 2 generations, 3 generations, people will be like, oh, who's that guy? So I think it's very liberating, because then you realize that, like, tying it back to ego is, even if you're the biggest, baddest, like, no, it doesn't matter, because in 2-3 generations, like, it doesn't matter, and just do it for you and enjoy it, because you might as well enjoy it, because no one cares. It's such a liberating thing. I feel like I talk to people, and sometimes people think it's very negative, but I find it very liberating realizing that nobody cares. Maybe I'll make another video. That'll be my next one. But a great other question in how to manage ego. Sorry, this is so chaotic. I'm hoping by the end of the 21, I'm less chaotic. I think if I had more time, and just to share a little bit about the journey, I think once I have more time to really plan and be a strategic, because right now I just kind of like have a topic, I write out some talking points, and boom, I just hit record. But now that once I'm done with this challenge and I'm kind of gonna have a little bit more time to plan or think out, I think I'll be a lot less chaotic. But I think one other really, really good question to ask yourself is, instead of asking yourself, oh my God, what are people going to think, how is this going to make me grow? So if you can ask yourself that question, I have found it's crazy. If you are just worried about what other people think, and like, oh, no. It's just, instead of saying, oh my gosh, what are people going to think? Just be like, how would this make me grow as a person? And if you can flip that switch, I have found it's been very, very helpful, because then you realize you don't need other people's validation or thought processes or help, or it's not for the external, it's for how you're growing. So I was just tying it back to that. Ooh, here's another one. I had this note. I can't remember where I heard it, but it was really, really good. Use ego as a motivator, not a master. Let it push you to start, but not control how you proceed. I think that's a really big one. So let me just, use ego as a motivator, not a master. Let it push you to start, because you could post that like, I'm training for a half marathon, and you're like, oh yeah, and you're super excited, and but then don't let it control how you proceed. Let it push you, let it get you across the starting line. But then when you're in the middle of the race and you're exhausted and you're so tired and your ego's like down and it's negative, how do you keep going? That's confidence. It's like, oh, I can do this. I can keep pushing. I can do it. But if you're just like, oh, I'm the best. No one can beat me. All that stuff. And then all of a sudden I just always go to racing because I feel like it's a really, really straightforward thing. But if you're in the beginning of the race thinking how awesome you are and how ready to go you are, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden halfway and you're cramping and you're about to give up, that's not somewhere where that's where grit and determination come in. It's not ego. It's like that's when it's you against you, and you have to push your mindset and you have to push your limits, and you can't be saying, oh, you're the best when you're cramping and you're dying in the middle of a race. It's like you're struggling. You can't be like, oh, I'm still the best. Like, nah, it's you against you, and it's your mindset. You gotta control it. So let ego be like a driving force of getting you to start, because sometimes it does help in a way where it at least gets you to do the thing, to sign up for the race, for that, where it can be a great starting point, but don't let it control. And confidence without humility can turn into arrogance very quickly. So if you can be very confident in your ability to get something done, but then just remain humble, that's the best balance that I have found. And always asking the right questions for yourself and building your self-awareness on ego and confidence and conviction and all of that stuff. So I found those things have been very helpful for me. So hopefully we contributed something in this episode. Thanks for tuning in again to Contribution with Connor, and have a great day, everyone. Much love, and stay tuned for more. Let's keep grinding on these episodes.